Smurfit Executive Development. We're delighted to be joined by my colleague, Pamela Fay, who teaches on our Diploma in Business and Executive Coaching. This is our third webinar of the 2021 Change Starts Here webinar series. We will have another one next Monday, the 8th of February, and that's with Camilla Beglin, who is our lead lecturer on the, one of our lead lecturers, sorry, on the Diploma in Leadership Development. I can send you some details about that afterwards. But for this morning, we are joined by Pam, and Pam is an executive coach, coach tutor, and a coach supervisor. She works with clients across a diverse range of industry sectors, both in Ireland and the UK. Prior to coaching, Pam was business performance manager with Diageo Ireland, and she started her career as a project manager with Board BIA, which at the time was known as the Irish Food Board. Pam holds a Master's in Executive Coaching and an Advanced Diploma in Organisational Supervision from Ashridge Business School in the UK. She is accredited by the EMCC at senior practitioner level as both a coach and a coach supervisor. So we're delighted to be joined by Pam. She advised me this morning that it's going to be a 30-minute interactive session, so we do urge you to get involved. You can submit questions in the chat feature. It's either at the top or the bottom of your screen, depending on what device you're using today. There will be questions throughout that Pam will be asking as well, so we will ask you to get involved, really get into it, because that's what coaching is. It's very practical, it's very interactive, so I hope you do enjoy it. The session is being recorded, so I will send you a copy of the recording either later today or tomorrow, along with a copy of the slides, so you don't have to be taking notes, that you can really enjoy it, and then you'll have it then to look back on and to share with colleagues and friends. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Pam.
Thanks a million, Annabelle. And just to say thank you to Annabelle for being here alongside me, and as well as looking after the marketing of our program. She's also a qualified coach, so I might engage you to help me with the questions later on. And also, thank you. And in the background, we have Mario Nunes as well. And Mario looks after the facilities in the Smurfit campus in Exec Ed. And since last March or April, Mario has been supporting us, excuse me, to enable us to work online and deliver our programs via Zoom. And I don't think we could have done it without you, Mario. So just a big shout out to you. And if anything goes wrong here this morning, it's just lovely knowing that you're there. So thank you. So all I ask of you to bring this morning, so welcome to everybody who's here. So delighted that you've come along. And what I would ask you just to bring, I suppose, is a curious stance, maybe, and a pen and paper as well. So if you have a pen and paper beside you, that would be wonderful. The intention for this morning is to take about half an hour of your time, and we're going to focus on this idea of leadership being a conversation, just like coaching is a conversation, okay? And I want to marry the two, because I think that if you're somebody who's curious about leadership or curious about coaching, you're probably doing a lot of this work already. But hopefully this will be a reflective space for you to enable you just to take a bit of time out to think about how am I doing on working with my peers, my colleagues, or my team at this stage. I'd love to know who's in the room with us. So I'm wondering, could you just take a moment to pop into chat who you are, whether you're a coach, whether you're a leader, whether you're somebody curious about coaching. You might be one of the alumni. So maybe just pop into chat wherever you see your chat button as to who you are. Annabelle, you might keep an eye on that for me.
Yep. So we have a few team leaders, people who are curious. We have a lawyer, alumni, an MSc pathway student.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so we have a lot of coaches and alumni, and then quite a lot of leaders. I'm having CEO come up here quite a bit, and I recognise some names of people who have already applied for our diploma starting now in March, or are thinking about it.
Brilliant.
And then we have people who are saying that they're brand new to coaching, so they'd like to learn more. So that curious piece.
How wonderful. So
very nice mix. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Annabelle. And it's really nice just to know who's here with us. So I'm hoping that I'll hit the mark in terms of thinking about each of your perspectives as well as we go through this morning. So I'm just going to ask you just to take a moment to set your intention for the next half hour. So my intention is to share a bit about leadership and coaching with you. And I'm wondering, can you just think for a moment yourself around what would success look like for you in the next half hour? And that might be to have some questions answered. It might be to walk away with more questions. But just gather a sense of that and just take a note of it for yourself about what you want to do for the next half hour. Okay. So thinking about this, the title of this talk is Next Level Leadership, or Taking Your Leadership to the Next Level Through Coaching. So I wanted just to talk a bit about what do I mean by next level leadership. And I'm going to talk a bit about this and I'm going to have some questions for you as we go through. So there's three areas that when I'm thinking about next level leadership, there's three areas that I think about. I think about self-leadership or self-mastery. I think about understanding others. So understanding the other person, whether it be another team member, it could be trying to influence upwards, it could be trying to influence in another organization. And I also think about understanding the systems that we're part of. So just let me talk about understanding self and system, because we're going to park those here. So understanding self is for another day. And it's a really important part of being a coach. So those coaches in the room will already know this, that in your training to be a coach, a lot of the work that we do is around understanding our own patterns of behavior, how we are in the world, what happens when we're in flow, what gets us stuck, who annoys us, because who annoys us is generally a part of ourselves. And so a lot of the work that we do in coaching on the diploma and in this lifelong learning is around understanding ourselves. How you might want to do that is through journaling, through having good conversations, through coaching, or through doing things like 360 reviews. And we're going to leave that there for another conversation, I think. The third part of next level leadership is understanding systems. And again, there are those that are better qualified than me who specialize in this area of coaching. But just to say for here that each of us is born into a system. So our family of origin is the first system that we're part of. And we learn how to be in the world through that system. And for the rest of our lives, our patterns of behavior and our patterns of relating come from that system. So it's a really important piece of work that you can do, again, with a coach or just in conversation or just in reflection around understanding systems. But today we're going to focus on understanding others better, because I really believe in this time of COVID, what is really important, and I think that's what's come out for us as being important in the world, is connection and having time for dialogue and having time for conversation. So that is our focus of today. And I know that you may have been drawn here with the words coaching and leadership. So I'm going to define for you now what I understand coaching to be and what I understand leadership to be. And hopefully that will lead us into this idea of leadership being a conversation. I'm just going to click up these. So the program that I teach on in Smurfit, alongside my colleagues Colin and Eileen and the rest of the coaching team, was developed. I did this program back in 2008, and I think it had been running for a year at that stage, but it was developed, a lot of the content at that time was developed by Peter Bluckert, who's one of the original coaches, an excellent gentleman. And although we have changed the program a lot, the ethos of the program has not changed. So I've chosen his definition and also a definition from Jeff Pelham, who teaches on our advanced diploma. So the first definition is that coaching is the facilitation of learning and development to improve performance. It also invariably involves growth and change, whether that be in perspective, attitude, or behavior. What I like about this definition is that there's movement in it. So from the moment that you start a coaching conversation, there's movement. So when I work with clients, I start off with a chemistry session where I go and meet the client, not physically, obviously, at the moment, but meet them virtually. And we talk about what their goals for coaching are, what success looks like for them. And really, as soon as they start having that conversation, there is movement and there's change. So that's what I like about this definition. The second definition of Jeff's is really important because this is about our stance on the program. And Jeff says that coaching is about enabling someone to find their own next step and to take this step in a skillful and effective way. What's important here is that as a coach, I don't tell anybody what to do. My role is to hold the space for somebody else to find their own way. My role is to ask questions. My role is to summarize, to work along a kind of a continuum of support to challenge, depending on what the client needs. But my most important thing is to hold hope and positivity for my client. So I see the good in them. I hold a non-judgmental space. And if you're coming to learn with us, which many of you have done, you'll know that this is core to our stance on coaching. And it does make us different to some other programs. And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to adopt a non-judgmental, space, to really have empathy all of the time for your client. But it's a really important part for us. And I'm going to define leadership, or what I think leadership is, now in a moment for you. So I've gone for another coach in terms of a leadership definition. Just I'm going to take some water. So Eric teaches on the Ashridge Masters that I did. And he's a really, really excellent coach. And also he's done a lot of work. And again, I direct you towards his website. You can Google him, around leadership shadow. So what gets in our way as leaders? And there's a whole body of work around that. But what I like about this definition, he says leadership is the function that is devoted to enhancing an organization's effectiveness. A couple of things I like about this definition, because you'll know as well as I do that there are more definitions than there are leaders out there. But in this one, leadership is everybody's job. So it can sit alongside the whole organization. It's not one man or woman at the top of the organization telling us all what to do. It belongs to everybody. And this is where I feel it really sits with leadership being a conversation. Also, what I like about this definition is Eric talks about effectiveness. It's not about profitability. It's not about shareholders. It doesn't have to be one definition of success. Effectiveness is different if you're working in a hospital or a social enterprise or a policy and research group or a PLC. But whatever effectiveness is for your organization, that's leadership is there to drive that effectiveness. And I wanted to talk to you a bit about what leadership feels like for me as a coach when I work in organizations, because this is really at the heart of this. Because leadership is a lived experience. So I work across many organizations. I've been coaching since 2008, so 13, 14 years. And what people come to me for coaching on is not about doing their job. It's all about relationships. It's all about getting on, what's tripping them up in relationship to others. Okay, so that's the work that I do. And when I go into an organization, I know that leadership is present in an organization if three things exist. If there is clarity of purpose, if my client understands what their role is in that purpose, and thirdly, if there is room for dialogue, that nobody is shut up or shut down. And I think back to Diageo, where I worked for about 4 years, there was space specifically given to dialogue in Diageo. So there was a whole creative space given to this idea of people coming together to have a conversation that neither of them knew where that was going to take them. Okay. And that's what I'm talking about, next level leadership. It's about this room for dialogue. So those three things again, and I'd ask you just to take a moment to reflect on your organizations. Is there clarity of purpose in your organization? Do you know what your role is in that? And do you have agency to act? Because you could say that Trump had clarity of purpose, but people working with them had no agency to act. He fired anybody who acted, and there was certainly no dialogue. So do you have agency to act? And the third piece, is there room for dialogue? So just take a moment, I guess, just to think about that. How is it where you are? I often like to think about what's the temperature like where you are. Does it feel warm or does it feel kind of cold? I'm not talking about the cold building, Annabelle, in Smurfit at the moment, but what's the culture like where you are? So just to take a moment and think about that. And you can answer that maybe on a scaled question if you wanted to. Just to develop this idea a bit further before we look at what we can do individually around this. I'm thinking about this idea of leadership being a conversation, because I think that leadership is a conversation. It's all about dialogue, and coaching is a conversation. And anybody can create that space for a conversation. You don't have to be a qualified coach to do that, as you know. There's a lovely article back from 2012. Groisberg and Slint wrote in the Harvard Business Review, and I have referenced it it'll go out to you in the slides. And they spoke about 4 things being present in organizations where leadership was a conversation. And those 4 things were intimacy, interactivity, inclusiveness, and intentionality. So let me talk about those just for a moment. I don't want to lose you on the theory, but I think this is really important. And it's an article I keep coming back to. We've used it a lot, so I think that says something. So intimacy is not intimacy in the romantic sense. It's intimacy in this idea of having really good conversations with your teams. So I'm reminded of a pal of mine who during her career was CEO of a bread company. And one of the things that she did in that role was to sit up in the bread vans in the morning at 5 o'clock in the morning and have conversations with the bread men, because they were all men at that stage delivering the bread, around what's happening for them. What are they encountering at the doors when they're delivering to Tesco or Spar? And that idea is to get to know your people and to hear what they have to say from the front line. And Sonia Nevis, who was an excellent coach and therapist, talks about this as well, around leaders needing to be able to be strategic and intimate. And again, I'll direct you to that article. So that's the intimacy piece, creating that space for dialogue. Interactivity is around having two-way conversation, so that everything is not just coming from top down, but it's having skip level meetings, it's having cross-functional teams, it's being interactive. Inclusiveness, the third I, is all around that we're all in this together. And I think we've all seen organizations over the last year who've really thrived in this, that they're in it together. You know, they're having conversations together. We're all in this COVID wave together. But what this means as well is around storytelling. So if you're working in an inclusive organization, anybody in that organization should be able to tell the story of the organization, so that you're not relying just on one person, but that anybody knows the story, knows the purpose, knows their role in the purpose, and can have a conversation about that. And the last piece is around the intentionality. So this is around how do you convey strategy? And that is about being very clear on why the organization exists and what it's here to do. So again, I just ask you to think about, on those 4 I's, when you read this article later, where is your organization on that? Okay. I'm wanting to cross the bridge now from leadership into coaching, if that's okay. And I'm just wanting to talk about how we're having conversations at the moment. This is what my life looks like. I was looking for a picture of women having a conversation on screen, but couldn't find one. But at the moment, all of our work is in this way. One person on screen, well, both people on screen, obviously, but I'm here in an embodied sense, talking to a screen. And the work still continues, and the coaching relationship is at the heart of the work that we do. And that conversation is two worlds coming together. It's two people with their systems, with their patterns, with their way of being in the world coming together. In the coaching relationship, I get the opportunity to work with people for 6 to 9 months, maybe. But if you're working in an organization, you get a chance to have much longer relationships with your colleagues. And I'm asking you just to think, can you hold in mind at the moment one relationship that is in flow and going well, and one maybe that is feeling a bit stuck? Because we all have conversations, we all have relationships that are going well and ones that are a bit stuck. Those of you that are coaches will know the next slide very well, because I think what comes together when we meet each other, so when we meet each other and have conversations, either as coaches or as leaders, or somebody who's just being curious, is the top line, the external world is presented first. So this might be, somebody comes to coaching because they're looking for a new role, or they've just stepped into a new role, or their work-life balance is out of kilter. But actually, when we stop, and this is what I really want us to do coming out of today, when we stop and we take time to have more conversation and to give another person space, we dip down below the line into their internal world. And we get a sense of what their emotions are like, what their thoughts are about themselves, what their self-confidence is like, what values they hold, what hopes they have for themselves. And this is where the magic is. This is where the magic is as a leader. This is where the magic is as a coach. So just dipping down below the line and really having these good conversations. And we all know how to do this. So we know how to do this with our closest friends. We know how to listen to each other. And what I'm really asking you to think about, and I'd imagine a lot of you are doing it already, but around how do I create more space to have conversations, more meaningful conversations in my workplace, whether it be on screen or in whatever way that is. And how we do this, Annabelle, am I running out of time?
No, you're okay. So in about another 10 minutes, then we'll have come to about 30 minutes. So I know you really want to have time for questions at the end. So I just wanted to let you know.
Thank you, Annabelle. So how we create this space is through listening. So a year and a half ago, I went down to Beara and I spent 5 days at a listening retreat with the most amazing practitioner, a lady called Rosamond Oliver, and her team down there. And we spent 5 days pretty much in silence, pretty much listening to each other. And what I really realized is that when we create that space for deep listening to each other, so when I am listened to, it enables me to be at my best. When I listen to others, it enables them to be at their best. And this is work that each of us has a skill set to do all of the time, but it is about taking the time. And that's the hard bit to get, the time. So can I ask you to pop into chat, what might hinder you creating space to listen to others? So what might prevent you listening? And just take a moment to think about that. So what's stopping you, if anything is stopping you listening? Yeah, technology, differing views, workload, time pressure. Overwhelm, absolutely. Busyness, habit. Oh, they're brilliant answers. Preconceived ideas, overwhelm, time poor. How wonderful. Yeah, they are brilliant answers. Distractions, background noise, time pressure. So we're all human, right? So this is the real life. And this is what comes up for each of us. And what I'm asking you to do today, and again, it may not be an easy ask, but if you can think of that one relationship that you want to improve on and think about creating that space. So I want to talk to you for the next 10 minutes just about, I'm going to share a listening model, and I'm going to share how important it is, and ask you to reflect before we get to the questions. So without boring you with another Harvard Business Review article, they've been writing about listening a lot recently, by the way, so we're not alone in this. And Connor, I think one of our class colleagues at the moment who might be on the call, shared with me an article from The Economist 2 weeks ago where they're also talking about listening. So it's topical. But why is it important? So managers who listen well are perceived as people leaders, they generate more trust, they instill job satisfaction, and they increase their team's creativity. So as well as being a good thing to do, it does help those around you, so there's a lot of research into this. A couple of questions for you that I just want you to take a moment to think about before I share the listening model. The most important thing is who listens to you. So when have you really experienced being listened to? So I'm not going to go into listing the people that listen to me, but I think I learned to listen really from my dad, who thankfully still listens to me, and also from my grandmother, who lived to 101. She was an amazing woman, but she would really create that space for listening, and it is a really precious space. So I know from my own my lived experience, the impact of being listened to is that I can talk out loud and get out the stuff that's up here, and that I have space to do so in a space that's non-judgmental, and that I can work out my own stuff. I'm not looking for anybody to solve it for me, but I just want the space. So I'm asking you just to reflect maybe later today on who listens to you. And if you're not getting that space, to create it for yourself. And then there's the other piece about how are you at listening to others. But I'm not wanting you to forget yourself in this, and that's really important. I have a lovely quote here from Henry Nouwen, and he said that the beauty of listening is that those who are listened to start to feel accepted, they start to take their words more seriously, and discovering their own true selves. So I'm going to share this model with you. I'm going to skip over that because that's not relevant for us this morning now. If there's one book that you buy yourself this year, there's a beautiful little book called The Tao of Dialogue. And it was written maybe 2 years ago by 7 practitioners, 7 coaches. It's only 78 pages. And I think it's the best book that I have on my bookshelves in terms of work. They got together, and their purpose in writing this book was to explain in simple terms how to transform human relationships, both in one-to-one and teamwork. So The Tao of Dialogue by Paul Lawrence et al., and I'll reference that too. But this is their listening model. And if you read from the left-hand side over to the right-hand side, if we just listen for noise, all we're doing is listening for the chance to jump in and speak. And a lot of people listen like that. They're only waiting for you to stop talking so they can come in again. If we're listening for the words that somebody's saying, we're just listening to the words. We're not listening with our whole body. But if we're listening for somebody's intention, and most importantly, their identity, we really get a sense of why something is important to the other person. So if I'm listening to Annabelle and I'm listening to something that she's passionate about, I get a sense of her. I get a sense of her values. I get a sense of why she wants to tell me something. And I get a sense of what she needs. And this, we're back to the earlier piece about the Grossberg and Slint article about having that intimacy with the people around you, to really get a knowing of who they are as a person. And that is what I mean by dropping down and taking leadership to the next level. It's not having these surface chit-chat relationships. It's about really going down, dropping down that level. I'm nearly finished now, Annabelle. I can see you probably wanting to jump in. So the last piece I'm going to ask you to think about is to take, so that breath is to take time for you. So I'm really wanting you to create time to be listened to. And if you're not getting that space, find that space for yourself. Whether it be, a lot of people have co-coaching if you're coaches, or find a coach, or find somebody to listen to you in some way. But also to create time to listen to others. So there's this two-way communication. And also maybe to reflect on that relationship that is working less well than you want it to. And what would happen if you just gave it an extra 20 minutes space a week in order just to build that connection a bit better. So we will send on these slides to you to have reflection on. I'm around all the time if anybody wants to further this conversation. And now I would love to take any questions that you have.
So Pam, one question that came in was about the retreat that you mentioned, the listening retreat. So maybe if will we give that then when I'm sending out the recording, that maybe you'll give some details about that.
Absolutely, as long as the person takes me with them. So it's down in a Buddhist centre in Beara in Cork, and it's the place is called Sakjun Beara. And the listening retreat, just interestingly, because it's a really important piece, they are doing it virtually at the moment, which is wonderful. So I will put that onto the resources. I'll just take a note of that just to put it on. But it's a most magical place in the world if you can get there. I know many people have been there.
Great. And someone else asked about listening is important, but action should follow.
It absolutely should sometimes. So if we think about how we make changes, sometimes we're not ready, and sometimes all we need to do is have a conversation to explore the thinking a bit more. So I direct them. There's a really interesting piece that Colin Murphy, my colleague, has done on Prochaska and the change model, which is also one of the webinars that's posted up on the site, Annabelle, that we can share, which talks about when people are ready for action and when they're not. So there's a lovely piece going alongside this. And I'd ask back, whose action is it anyway? You know, so make sure that it's a person. So I'd often think that I'm not forcing anybody into action. I will work alongside my coachee or my coaching client whenever they're ready to make action. What else is there? Annabelle, do you have any questions or any?
Sorry, just one other that came in there, Pam, was somebody asked about how do you create space to listen?
Really, that's a really good question. And it's, do you know what? I'm not saying that it's easy online either. For me, it's about switching off the phone and creating that half hour to have a conversation. And it can be done, I find the best listening can be done on phone. I do a lot of my coaching on the phone, and I get coached on the phone sometimes because I can really dial up my ears to listen. I think there's also something, if you're offering a listening space to somebody else, it's about an offering, you know, so inviting them in to listen. But there's something about slowing down and creating space, which is not easy when people are so overwhelmed and busy. Any other thoughts or questions coming up?
So somebody asked here about what about raising expectations that we do not have the time or resources to meet when initiating conversations?
Yeah, and I guess, yeah, sometimes we can't be that listener for somebody else, you know. So, and sometimes we don't have the time in that moment. So oftentimes, if somebody wants to have a conversation, there might be something around saying, I can't just in this moment, but tomorrow at 11, I'm free for half an hour if that works for you. And there's something coming up for me as well around listening is really important, but there's something about the person who is speaking that they're walking away with. Firstly, they're joining the conversation with some purpose. So if I'm coming to talk to you, Annabelle, and I just want you to hear me for half an hour, I'll come with the topic, if that makes sense. So I'll come with something that I want to talk to you about. If you were going to coach me or listen to me. I would really encourage, if there's anybody who's kind of hesitating about it, just maybe to take one step, and maybe don't. My invitation would be to create space for somebody who the relationship is already strong, and maybe create a bit more space so that you're not tackling your toughest relationship. That makes sense? Anything else coming up?
Somebody actually asked about this, and it actually came up for me as well, is that they'd love to know more about the leadership shadow that you mentioned in the presentation.
Absolutely. So the leadership shadow, do you know, essentially what it is all around the fallout, the fallout that we leave in our wake. So some leaders are amazing in terms of what they achieve, but they leave a lot of debris behind them. And the Eric's thinking, and again, Eric Dehan, I think .com, but you can Google the website and I can direct you towards it as well. His whole thesis, and he's done a lot of presentations, which would be online as well on this, is all around we need to understand ourselves. So I as a person need to understand the parts of myself that I'm showing you the world, but I also need to understand my shadow self. I need to understand the parts of myself that I'm not showing you, because those are the parts that will come and trip me up later unless we deal with them. And that's for every human being, by the way. You know, so, and that's why coaching or a thinking or listening space can be hugely beneficial to that. A space where you're not judged, a space where there's unconditional positive regard for you. But he would talk about the fact that if we don't tackle what's just out of reach, that shadow side, it will come to, I was going to use bad language there to say, bite us in the butt at some stage, you know, but it's about understanding ourselves better. But again, if you Google leadership shadow and Eric Dehan, there'll be presentations. He did a brilliant presentation in Boston about 18 months ago, and it should be online.
Maria asked a very interesting question here, and I think it's quite fitting at the moment because we're finding ourselves on Zoom a lot, and also even for our diploma in business and executive coaching, it's being delivered online at the moment.
It is, yeah.
And yes, we very much hope to be back in the classroom later this year. But Maria asks, so Zoom seems a lot harder to be a good listener if people only want to do Zoom. Is this something you would agree with?
I do agree, Maria. Like, I think I choose to do a lot of my work when I'm the speaker. So if I'm being coached, so when I meet my coach and when I meet my coach supervisor, I'll do a lot of those on the phone. And I won't sit here in my office. I'll sit in a comfy chair and I'll have my headphones on and a pen and paper. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm answering the question, Annabelle, but just that, like, I create a different space. I want to have a look at myself. Sorry. Am I answering the question, Maria?
There.
Can't just see it. You know, because, sorry.
So if someone is insisting on being on Zoom, and let's say, sorry, this is what I'm kind of interpreting, is that if they're insisting, I only want to do my coaching conversation on Zoom,
yeah.
You know, is it harder to listen to somebody when you're coaching them on Zoom?
No, like this work works virtually. That's what, if the last year has taught us anything, it's taught us that mood travels across Zoom, that emotion travels across Zoom. And I mean, I've been coaching across Zoom since last March. Well, I had been doing it beforehand anyway, but for different reasons. But no, the work, what does it require? I guess would be my question to myself. It requires an even deeper slowing down. It requires even more mindfulness and meditation. It requires even more space. And what I find a lot of clients are doing is maybe taking an hour rather than an hour and a half session, but they might meet you more regularly, if that makes sense. So there's even a need for more connectedness. And I think there's something for me when I'm working virtually like this is that I call it, if I'm working with a client and we are having difficulties, is we'll have a conversation around it. You know, saying what is difficult here, you know, or if we work in an embodied way, I'll put my camera down so you can see more of me. You know, so, and we do body work, we do chair work, we do loads of different things on Zoom. So it can be done, but I think that the question is a good one. There's something about really acknowledging the difference, you know. I mean, I can't wait to be sitting in a circle back in Smurfit again. You know, can't wait to have that embodied experience again. But at the moment, it's not half bad. It's working well. Yeah.
And another kind of follow-on question, I suppose, here is from Alexandra, and it's about, you know, that you mentioned a lot about body language, but could you mention a couple of audio cues to listen to?
Oh, Alexandra, brilliant question. So my big piece that I listen for is breath. So I listen for inhale and exhale. And particularly, I'll notice it in myself. If I'm holding an emotion, it might be held in my breath. And I'll notice my own exhale. But if I'm listening to the client, I listen to their breath a lot. And I'll even say, what does that breath want to say if there's a big exhale? Because our body holds our emotions. So our body keeps the score, as we know. Yeah. And tone of voice, pace of voice. The other piece that we listen to a lot is metaphor or image. So if somebody's talking about, you know, I feel myself standing beside a brick wall. You might talk about the brick wall and what does that mean for them. So it's really, I think Alexandra's question is a really good one. It's really paying attention. I think that's the big piece coming up. Really paying attention.
So we have a lot of questions, Pam, and obviously I'm conscious now we're almost coming up to 45 minutes. So I'll just take one more, and George just put this in. So he just asked about how important is the emotional proximity between leaders and employees?
Emotional proximity. So what I'm taking him to mean, what I'm understanding from that is that idea of the intimacy, that idea of really understanding each other at an emotional level. And I think for me, it's really important. We are, and again, in our coaching work, we do a lot of work in this. We have brains in our head, in our heart, and in our guts. And so we work with those three brains all the time. And that is scientific fact. It's not, I'm not making it up. And if anybody wants to go and read about this, they can do a lot of reading in Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, or Holds the Score. So as feeling emotional beings, I think it is really important to have that proximity, that emotional proximity. But I'll also say that boundaries are important. So I think I'm back to the very beginning of this webinar, thinking about the most important thing that we can do for ourselves is understand ourselves and understand where our boundaries are, and acknowledging that relationships take a while to build. So I know Annabelle very well. And so our emotional proximity might be quite close because we've known each other a long time and we've had really good conversations over that time. And we've had fun trying to film things and do, you know, so there's history there. But if we've only just met, we wouldn't be as close. And it's to allow the time for both people to form that that close working relationship or that emotional proximity. Yeah.
So somewhere in it, I know somebody asked a question about they've actually finished one of our master's pathways, but they're now they've become very interested in coaching and wanting to know what diploma do you need to start with on the MSc in Business and Executive Coaching pathway. So the answer to that question is that if you want to do the coaching masters with us, you must begin with this diploma in Business and Executive Coaching, which Pam teaches on. So it happens twice a year, and which leads me on nicely to just what I want to finish up with. So our next intake of that diploma program is starting on the 23rd of March. It's 10 months long, so it's starting in March and it's finishing in January 2022. It's a full-on program, you know, you really do need to have the time to commit to it. There are 6 modules which are all held midweek, so it's usually like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or a Tuesday and Wednesday. There's 16 days in total, and they're full days from 9 to 5. So along with, obviously, people ask, you know, what's the workload then like? So you have a lot of pre-reading, you have obviously coming to class, and then you have assignments, and then you have 90 hours pro bono coaching. So that's really putting your skills that you're learning in class into practice. It is a full-on program, but transformative. And I mean, Pam, as she mentioned, she was a participant on this program many years ago and is now teaching on it, which is great, along with Eileen and with Colin and other members of that coaching team that are teaching. At the moment, we are online until the end of June, so which means the first 3 modules will be held online, and then the last 3 then will hopefully be back in the classroom. So as Pam alluded to, you will be in your circle of trust and you will really open up to each other. It's quite a personal program, but truly transformational. So the nice thing about this coaching diploma is that some people have already done some other diplomas with this, for example, business finance or strategy, but the coaching diploma actually bridges 2 different coaching pathways. So it's part of our MSc in master's pathways, I meant. It is on our MSc in Business Leadership Management Practice pathway, and it's also on the MSc in Business and Executive Coaching pathway. The cost of the program is €13,315, and then there is a UCD Business Alumni discount, which makes it €12,649. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. If anybody is looking to learn more about it, Pam or I would be delighted to talk to you, or one of the other coaching tutors on the programme. I will send you some slides with these this information that I did talk about here about the diploma. I do have only a couple of places remaining for the diploma starting in March. It will be running again then in October. We also have other programs starting this spring, and we have a few places remaining on them. So if you're interested in any of those, I'll send you the list as well. Please do get in touch, and we'd be delighted to answer any questions or send you on the online application form. That's kind of it. I'd like to thank Pam, and also, as Pam said, Mario is our amazing support in the background. You don't get to see him, but we can always depend on him. Thank you to all of you for joining us, and I will send out a copy of the recording, a copy of all the references Pam made in the presentation, and a copy of her slides, along with my slides with that information I talked about. And I will also send you the link if anybody wants to register for the next webinar happening, which is next Monday, and that's with Pamela Fay, who is one of the lead lecturers on our leadership development program, and it's on fearless leadership, so that should be very interesting. And so I wish you all a great day. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.